And we're here at the Young Women's Leadership Conference. Amazing conference with Sergeant Smith from the National Police Association. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Isn't this an amazing event?
It's fantastic. I was able to catch some of your speech earlier, and I really appreciated it because you were talking about safety. And I believe you said we can't be free unless we're safe.
That's absolutely it. People who don't feel safe aren't free. And, we talk a lot about how the American military helps to maintain our freedoms as Americans, and that's absolutely true. But your day-to-day freedoms are assisted by the American law enforcement officer. And that's why the National Police Association exists, because we are fighting the woke movement, the woke anti-cop movement, anti-justice system movement by doing so many different things to support the American law enforcement officer and the people who support us.
What do you think is happening with law enforcement? Because when I heard the concept originally of defund the police, I mean, I can't even say I thought it was a joke. I was like, defund the police? That doesn't make any sense. But it has happened, and I don't understand why.
Well, 3 years ago, after the death of George Floyd, there began this vilification and demonization of the American law enforcement officer. And so many politicians said, let's get rid of the police, let's defund the police. And it happened in so many jurisdictions across this country. Austin, Texas, New York, Washington, D.C., L.A., Portland, Seattle, Chicago. Yeah, and now you can look at all those communities and see how 3 years of vilifying and demonizing their police and taking away their funding has made it more dangerous, not just for the cops, but for their citizens.
So what's the solution at this point? What should people be asking for?
That's a great question. You've got to look at what we're doing, which is fighting that false narrative that somehow the American law enforcement officer is the problem. And that's what we need our citizens to do. We need them to speak up, to know the facts. And you can go to our website at nationalpolice.org, read the facts, subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be able to say to your friends, hey, that's not true. American cops aren't racist, and they're not gunning down unarmed young black men every day. What they're doing is trying to preserve freedom in the United States for everyone, not just a select few.
Just to wrap it up, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would like to take a look at some of those stats, because when we hear the stats, the narrative is that there is a police force that is racist, that is against black men, and that is the narrative that has been put forth. Can you give me some stats that negate that so that people better understand?
Absolutely. So last year we had about 52 million police citizen contacts in this country. Of those 52 million, we arrested about 10 million people. Of those 10 million people, we used force in less than 2% of all those cases. Now, the American law enforcement officer ends up using deadly force against about 1,000 citizens a year. Last year it was 1,147 police officers. 1,147 people that we had to shoot and kill. Of those, about 200 of them were African American. We end up using deadly force against white people far more often than we do by African Americans. And how many of those each year are unarmed? It depends on the year, but it's usually 7 to 10. But unarmed means they were driving a vehicle. They tried to take our gun. And we also have police officers murdered every year by people with no weapons, hands, fists, and feet. So unarmed doesn't mean not dangerous.
One last question. Do you think that we need to take a look at black on black crime? Is that something that we're just ignoring?
Well, there are some people who ignore that black on black crime. And yes, we do need to take a look at it. But for me, a middle-aged white woman, to talk about black on black crime, I'm called a racist and this and that. Listen, I'm a cop and I want people to be safe. And we have got to look at who is committing crime. And quite frankly, after the death of George Floyd, every year since 2020, thousands more young African-American men in this country are murdered, and it's primarily by other young African-American men, and it's got to stop.
Sergeant Smith, Thank you so much for joining us today. I certainly appreciate it. National Police Association, correct? National Police Association, Sergeant Smith.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much